Really worried about my 31F relationship with my boyfriend 30M. Hi, everyone. I've been going through some rough times, especially in relation to my family, work, mental health, and figuring out my new relationship with my boyfriend. We've been getting to know each other since July of last year, and we started dating in September 2024, officially boyfriend/girlfriend in October 2024. So, short relationship. It's brought me a lot of joy, but we have some things to work on that, if not fixed, I fear I might need to break up with him. Anyhow, everything was great to start. I think this has the healthiest relationship I've been in my life. But there are problems, and I'm wondering if I will need to end the relationship due to the current problems. To understand the tough time that I put my current boyfriend through, you have to understand a bit about my life history. I was emotionally abused by two narcissistic parents growing up. This was a situation of constant criticism from both parents, occasional violence from my dad, 59M, and for me, a responsibility to constantly emotionally regulate myself so well that I was essentially a parent to both my parents, who insist on treating me like a child even through my 30s. When I was in my mid-20s, I was pursued romantically and S.A.D. by a manager at work, 33F, when I was 25F, who was polyamorous. He became my boyfriend after the first SA, given I lost my virginity to him. He was very narcissistic, manipulative, charismatic, antagonistic, and polarizing. It was a very emotionally abusive situation, and I was stuck in it for 2.5 years. The fallout was very bad for me. I lost most of my friends. I had severe PTSD and depression and anxiety. It was a hard time, and people who saw what I was struggling with really saw the hurt I was going through and viewed me as being emotionally strong with the wisdom that I built over time. I mention this part just because I want people to understand where my sensitivity to abuse comes from. Fast forward to 2 months ago, when I visited my parents' home, my dad got extremely angry and volatile at me asking for us to take turns speaking. Both my parents were making false accusations at me. In his anger, my dad threw a heavy chair at a glass desk. Nothing broke. Technically, there was still one wheel on the ground, but the violence was a threat to me and scared me deeply. He screamed at me for 15 to 20 minutes, guilting me for a mental health emergency I went through in the previous year. I spent the whole next week dry heaving and throwing up. I ate half the amount as usual because I was throwing up my food. I was so sick that I got a medical note excusing me from work for a month. My resting heart rate, according to my Apple Watch, went up 14 BPM and was sustained there for a month and a half. I was in the process of getting diagnosed for ADHD, which I do have the official diagnosis for now, but at the time, I could not handle both the ADHD combined with abuse from my family. It was so distressing that I could not focus. On top of the barfing, I manifested a cough shortly after my dad did his abusive thing, and I could not stop coughing for a full month. Anyhow, I took most of the situation like a champ. Deep down, I was very upset that I thought it was appropriate to not see my family for the next 3 years, except for in public places. It felt like a breakup with my parents. My mom said I was to blame for my dad mentally losing his shit, but didn't word it as such. It was that I was the one rebelling against him, not letting him have his way. Even my brother, who is usually the level-headed one, faulted me for escalating the situation, even though all I did was ask for us to take turns talking, pointing out when things my dad said was untrue, generally just standing up for myself. And I think it was probably important for me to do that. It was a warning that I would be very sick if he didn't stop. He did not stop, and the consequence was that I was very sick for a month. I assume what I went through is tough for anyone, but the thing I'm focused on understanding at the moment is the way I let it affect my relationship with my current boyfriend, 30M, and if I'm in the wrong in any way. Anyhow, when all of this was going down, I was driving to a psychiatrist 2 hours away, who was a part of a medical safe haven that I had access to as a part of a domestic violence recovery group in my hometown. This medical safe haven was the only resource that I came across that gave me access to the tools I needed to beat my PTSD, severe anxiety, and depression back in 2020 to 2021. My psychiatrist at Kaiser refused to change my medication, which was causing me to sleep 12 hours a day, causing me to miss work, and they would not evaluate me for ADHD because I had anxiety and I was over their age limit for diagnosis, even though the anxiety was caused by the ADHD, making it hard to manage my life. And even if I did get diagnosed, they wouldn't give me a stimulant, ADHD med because it might trigger bipolar, which I had a single episode of. Kaiser does not pay for out-of-network care, so the medical safe haven was able to give me some paid for sessions. So, when I kept needing to drive 2 hours to receive my medical care, it stressed my boyfriend out a ton. My coughing was so severe that I couldn't breathe at times, and I needed to go to the emergency room during one of my trips. Given my people-pleasing habits, I was uncomfortable missing a wedding in SoCal the next day, so I ended up flying down because it was too late to cancel my $600 hotel, and I didn't want to have to explain to my parents that I was in the ER the day before, nor have the talk that it was kind of due to them that I was sick in the first place. I don't regret going. It was really nice to have my brother stay with me for a night. I do regret that I felt I had so little emotional support that I spent an absurd amount of money at a boutique buying clothes. My health was shit, my mental health was shit, and I felt I had no one to lean on. I was grieving that I did not want to be in contact with my family. My BF was stressed even interacting with me. Shopping was the only thing that cheered me up at the time. Now, I do get that me overstretching myself was very concerning, but through this whole thing, my boyfriend would get overly stressed talking to me and restricted my ability to see him. He said he'd come to see me for a bit during the weekend, but wouldn't let me drive to see him. But it caused me more distress because I wasn't getting the emotional support I needed to recover. I got a text from him when I was driving back from the emergency room that people would forgive me for not going if they knew I just went through a medical emergency. But if he really wanted to convince me to not go, I wish he would have offered to talk to me and been comfortable enduring a phone call with me to talk out my reasoning for going and essentially have a talk with me about how I should be prioritizing myself. I would have listened. Admittedly, I'm a bit stubborn sometimes, but so is he. But instead, he stayed silent about his feelings and what he wanted/needed me to do, and I felt even more stressed because he conveyed to me that me being stressed and sick was stressing him out. Fast forward to last night, he revisited the topic and asked me if the breakdown, sickness, and distress that I had would be something that would ever happen again. I was really taken aback by him saying that. I told him, no, probably not, but I can't promise anything. I've learned from the situation that I shouldn't focus so much on pleasing my parents and other people. So, in future cases, going to a wedding the day after an ER visit probably won't happen again. After he talked with me about the 2-hour trips to my psychiatrist wearing me down, I started taking steps to find a new psychiatrist in my area outside of Kaiser, so the long drives won't likely be an issue. But I feel kind of hurt, because I feel like the stress I was under and the sensitivity to abuse that I had was justified and made sense. I didn't feel like I was getting emotional support with him, because all the talks I had with my boyfriend, he conveyed that I was having a negative effect on his well-being. To give him some credit, he did listen some, but I felt very guilty about how it affected him. Of course, he was worried because he cared about me, but I feel like he could have been more proactive in giving me support. What I needed from him is for him to let me know he's available to talk with me, to help work out my problems. I do take feedback. He's really sensitive to even a 30-minute drive. I have more stamina than that. He kept on asking me to take care of myself, but that's what I thought I was doing. The other reason why I'm considering a breakup at this point is we talked about how it would be helpful if he was better at listening and able to give emotional support. He told me I'm not good at that. I'm not gonna lie. And he slowed down to tell me he's not professionally trained to give that kind of support. To me, that's not a valid excuse. I'm not professionally trained either, but I've been a good listener since I was little, and I have been known to be a source of emotional support to my friends. Being able to go to my partner for emotional support is a non-negotiable to me. I don't get it from my parents. I can sometimes get it from my friends, but I need to date someone who is reliably there for me. If he has a work emergency or something, I can self-regulate and last through it. But the emotional intimacy of sharing your hopes, dreams, fears, and learning new wisdom from each other is really important to me. In addition to that, both of us want to have kids, and if he's not able to give emotional support to me, he certainly won't be able to provide that for a child. I feel like if I'm with him long-term, I'm just one crisis or medical emergency away from him leaving me, or blaming me for causing him distress. He's been supportive in other practical advice sort of ways, though. I just lost my job 2 days after I got back from medical leave, so he's been great in terms of giving advice about just focusing on myself, not helping out weird startups that don't pay me. He seems to still respect me despite the job loss. He's been paying for all our meals, which is really generous of him. He makes a lot of money, so he just took the burden off of me. I want to give him a shot because I think he cares. I get that I can be a bit stubborn about what decisions to make for myself, but I want my partner to at least voice their concerns and discomfort. If it's really important to them, and within reason, I'll accommodate where I can. I've consulted with a couple friends, so I think the next steps are just to talk to him about how it's okay that he's not that experienced at listening or providing emotional support to others, but I need him to try to work at getting better. He probably has his own traumas that make it hard for him to endure other people's distresses, but I'd like to talk it out and explore with him why it's so tough for him. I usually have a positive spin at the end of my talks about emotional stuff. Building wisdom is really invigorating for me. I'm not looking for support to trauma dump. It's just fulfilling for me to contemplate how to live with someone whose insight I trust. I know I'm not perfect in my own situation. Is there anything I'm doing wrong? I know I can be stubborn sometimes, but I try to listen. Does anyone have any advice as to how to handle my trauma and drama with people who are sensitive? I received feedback from my boyfriend that it felt jarring that I was fine for a very long time, positive and cheerful, until I reached my breaking point and it all crashed at once. I feel like I'm trying to be considerate of other people when I don't dump all my woes to others. It can be overwhelming for others, and not everyone consents to hearing about such emotional things. But it takes me some time to open up about negative things. I do so more often when I trust a person can handle hearing it without it affecting their mental health. Any tips on managing my well-being would be great too. TLDR, my boyfriend, 30M, is very sensitive to stress, so much that when I went through an emotionally tumultuous time, turning extremely sick, coughing excessively, after being emotionally abused and threatened by my dad, 59M, my boyfriend was overwhelmed with concern and distress for me being sick and coughing. I know it was worrisome, but I couldn't control that I had such negative reaction to another round of abuse. I don't know if I can lean on my boyfriend for emotional support and am unsure if this is worth breaking up over.